Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webcast today. It's Andy Lennox here. I'm the president of Logix Brands, and today we have a short 20 or 25-minute webcast on one of our products, Halo Interra, the advanced reflective interior rigid insulation. And thanks everybody for taking the time to join us. Francis Roma, our technical director, or our director of technical services, is going to be conducting the presentation today. We have Tyler Simpson, our manager of building science. He's as well here to answer any questions that may come up. So we have about a 20 or 25-minute webcast. It's not going to be very long, but we hope you find it informative and entertaining. And at the end, you'll notice you can answer questions or can ask questions into your control panel. If questions do come up, please type them in, and we'll address as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Everyone's muted that's attending here, just so we can provide a good quality of presentation. But feel free to type in any questions or comments you might have. Hey, Francis, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Andy, and thanks again, everyone, for being with us for this webcast, Halo Interra, the Advanced Reflective Interior Rigid Insulation. Okay, so what we're going to cover is we'll go through product overview, then we'll get into the features and benefits of using Halo Interra, talk a bit about graphite polystyrene insulation, which is insulation we use for our Halo products. We'll talk a bit about applications, how we're code-compliant, typical installation practices, the tech support that we can offer, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. All right, so Halo Insulation is part of Logix Brands. Logix makes a number of foam building products, including Logix insulated concrete forms, heat sheet, which is an insulated floor panel system designed to accommodate in-floor radiant tubing, Chrome GPS, which is basically Halo Interra without the lamination on it, or Halo boards without any lamination. And then we have Halo insulation, rigid insulation boards. So we are part of a consortium of leading EPS molders, and together we have the strength of a multinational with nimble and attentive local support and service. Okay, so what is Halo? Halo, as I mentioned, is our line of rigid insulation board products, but what makes Halo unique is that the foam insulation is made of GPS. That's graphite infused EPS foam. So it's basically the conventional white EPS you see in the market today, but with graphite built into it, and that's what gives our boards its gray color. I'll talk a little bit more about GPS a little later, but for now, I just want to give you a quick intro into our Halo line of products. They're available in 4x8 sheets, thicknesses from 9/16 all the way up to 2 inches, and we can make custom dimensions as well. So one of the Halo products we have is, of course, Halo Interra and Interra FR. They both have a reflective laminate, and they're both used for above and below grade interior insulation. The main difference between Interra and Interra FR is that Interra FR is specially formulated and tested to comply with US building codes where it's permitted to have no ignition barrier when in use. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. We also have Subterra and Subterra Plus. They're both used for below grade under slab insulation as well. And Subterra has a thick polypropylene laminate, whereas Subterra Plus has a more durable woven polypropylene fabric. So that makes Subterra Plus a little more durable and resilient to heavy construction traffic, and it makes it more flexible too. So it's more suited for commercial use, but it can be used for residential as well. And we have Xterra, which has a perforated reflective laminate, and that's used for above grade exterior insulation. Okay, so for this webcast, we're talking about Halo Interra and Interra FR. Again, both products are used for above grade and below grade for interior insulation. So Interra and Interra FR, they're both simply composed of two components. That's That's the GPS foam insulation with the reflective laminate. The end result is a product that can replace your interior air and vapor barrier while providing a continuous insulation and also offering reflective benefits. So let's go over some of the main features common to both Interra and Interra FR. It's suitable for new construction, but cost-effective for interior renovations as well. It has a high stable R value of R5 per nominal inch. That's higher than conventional EPS and at par with XPS. And because unlike XPS where it loses R value over time, Interra and Interra FR, they have a higher long-term R value than XPS. The laminate provides a co-compliant air and vapor barrier, so it can replace your typical 6 mil polyethylene sheets. It's lightweight and durable and flexible, and that's due to the lamination we use. It provides a strong adhesive bond for tape sealing joints and penetrations. It also provides continuous insulation, so it creates that thermal break that you need against your studs, your ceiling joists, rafters, your slab on grade, and your concrete foundation walls. It can also offer reflective benefits, so it can reflect radiant heat back into the interior if a gap is provided over Interra. And it's not affected or promotes mold growth. So those are the common features and benefits of both Interra and Interra FR. So let's look at the differences a little closer between Interra and Interra FR. Interra, it does require thermal barrier when used. Interra FR doesn't require thermal barrier. Interra FR has been tested to NFPA 286 and approved for use without an ignition barrier. So if you don't want drywall over your Interra in attics, basements, and crawl spaces, it can be left exposed for up to thicknesses of 2.28 inches. And that's also co-compliant to IBC and RRC as well. I should point out, because the codes in the US and Canada are different, this only applies to the US and not Canada. So that's the main difference with Interra FR. You could use it without ignition barrier if you're looking to not use any type of drywall over your insulation. Now I'm going to talk about Chrome GPS briefly here as well. Chrome GPS is basically unfaced. It's basically Interra, but without the reflective laminate. So it's just unfaced GPS insulation. So we offer this product because it's also NFPA approved for use without an ignition barrier, and it's compliant to IBC and RC as well. So it can be left exposed up to 2 1/8 inch thick before you need to put an ignition barrier on it. I should point out though, because it does not have a laminate like Interra does, it won't provide your air and vapor barrier properties or the reflective benefits that you would get with Interra. Typical applications include basement, crawl spaces, and attics, and it can be used for above grade exterior insulation as well. So if you want to leave your insulation exposed on the interior but don't need the reflective benefits you would get with Interra FR, you can use Chrome GPS instead. Okay, so we talked about Interra products, including Chrome GPS. Now let's talk about GPS installation that we use for Halo products. So Halo is made with GPS. I'd like to talk a little bit about this so you get a better understanding of why we use it and why it makes Halo a more advanced type of rigid insulation product. It's made by BASF under the brand name Neopore Plus. It's an advanced form of expanded polystyrene. GPS is conventional EPS with graphite particles. So EPS insulation, we know it's a good material for resisting heat flow. And when you add graphite to it, it not only resists heat flow, it also reflects and absorbs radiant energy. So it actually increases the R value by up to 30%. And as a result of this, you get an R5 per nominal inch, which is higher than conventional EPS and at par with XPS. So Neoport is independently tested and certified in US and Canada, and it's Green Guard certified for low chemical emissions. Okay, so let's compare GPS and XPS in terms of R value for a minute here. We can match it for flexural and compressive strength, but GPS does outperform XPS in terms of R value. GPS has a higher long-term R value than XPS. So Neoport GPS provides zero thermal drift of R value, meaning it has a long-lasting stable R value. It won't drastically reduce over time. Whereas XPS, it uses a blowing agent that's known to leak over time. And as it does, it reduces its R value. And because of this, they do have to state long-term thermal resistance for XPS insulation products. You might notice in a lot of their warranties, they typically state that 90% R value is retained long-term. So if we consider this, then XPS long-term R value is about R4.5 instead of the R5 per inch that they typically claim, which is less than GPS. So short-term R values, GPS and XPS are about the same, but when you consider long-term R values, because GPS doesn't lose its R value like XPS does, you actually GPS actually has a higher R value than XPS. So when you're using GPS, you can expect that R value to remain long-term. It's also worth noting in Canada, there's been developments in the CAN ULC standard for rigid foam insulation products. They have to be tested under S701. They've always required XPS insulation specifically to test long-term thermal resistance. Prior standards, they've allowed reporting up to R5, but now it's been changed and that's been reduced to R4.7 instead of R5. It's worth noting though that this R value represents the R value after 5 years from production, but because it's known to leak over time beyond 5 years, and you can expect that R value to be even lower beyond that 5-year period. If you want to know more about this, we do have a tech bulletin that talks about it in more detail on our website. Okay, so we talked about Interra, Interra FR, and Chrome GPS. Just to sum it up, Interra FR and Chrome GPS, they can be used without an ignition barrier on the interior. Chrome GPS doesn't have a laminate. Interra and Interra FR both have air and vapor barrier properties and can provide reflective benefits as well. Okay, so let's move on to applications. So Interra was really meant to replace their air and vapor barrier, but at the same time provide continuous insulation. So it's suitable for the interior side of roofs, including cathedral ceilings, the interior side of exterior above grade walls, above slab applications, and the interior side of foundation walls. So for this webcast, we'll focus on foundation walls because I think this is where Interra is used most often, and consequently, that's where most of the questions come from. So we'll look into this just a little further. Okay, before we get into insulating foundation walls with Interra, it's important to know a little bit about moisture issues in basements, what causes it, and what we think can prevent it. So whenever you put insulation against a foundation wall, you're now providing a surface where condensation can occur. And this can be caused by two main things. So moisture in the warm air against a cold concrete surface, and moisture from the concrete coming out to the interior space. So once you put any type of barrier against the foundation wall, you're allowing moisture from the interior space or the concrete to potentially condense on it if the conditions are just right. So how do you prevent this? There are three main things you can do to minimize moisture issues when insulating a foundation wall. One is to provide sufficient insulation. So the thicker the insulation, the less chances of condensation. And that's because the interface between the insulation and the interior space will be about the same temperature. So no condensation can occur there. And also the interface between the concrete and the insulation will also be about the same temperature. So there's no issues with condensation there as well. Condensation will only occur if there's enough moisture in the air and it touches a cooler surface. So number 2 is to make sure you provide continuous insulation to create a complete thermal break against the foundation wall. If you don't provide continuous insulation, then there's a potential for moisture issues where there is little or no insulation. And number 3 is to use impermeable insulation. Excuse me. This will provide, it'll prevent moisture-laden air from going through the insulation and condensing on a cooler surface. So if you use a permeable insulation like bad insulation between your cavity wall, for instance, then you're allowing the transfer of air and moisture that can reach the concrete and condense. So making sure it's impermeable will create a barrier to keep moisture from the concrete on the concrete side and moisture on the interior side. Okay, so with Interra, its properties are designed to meet these conditions that prevent moisture issues when insulating foundation walls from the interior. It provides sufficient insulation. So when you're insulating your basement with Interra, you can make it thick enough to meet the thermal insulation values required in the building codes and thick enough to minimize any condensation. It provides the continuous insulation that you need to get rid of any thermal bridging. And the laminate we use for Interra makes it air and vapor impermeable so that there's no movement of moisture through the insulation. So if you want to insulate your basement from the interior and minimize any moisture issues, Interra is designed to do that. All right, so let's talk about how we meet code. It's pretty straightforward, but we'll just go through it. Starting with the US codes, what I've got here is a chart on the top right, and this comes out of the IRC. We've got climate zones 1 through 8 with the corresponding R values for continuous insulation, and then we got the corresponding required thickness of Interra. So basically, whatever climate zone you're in, just make sure you provide enough thickness of Interra to meet the code. A lot of the times you're gonna have a frame wall in front of your Interra for your services. If you end up having to add cavity insulation or prefer to take that route, as long as you provide at least 1 inch of Halo Interra and R13 cavity insulation with 2x4 framing. This is code compliant up to, well, basically for all climate zones. So as long as you take this approach, you know, you're easily code compliant in the States. On the Canadian side, climate zones 4 to 8, we have the corresponding R values and the corresponding thickness of Interra that you would need. So on the left side, if you're not going to use cavity insulation, it's simply just meeting the thickness that you need for your insulation. If you do have to put in cavity insulation, as long as you're providing about 2-inch Halo Interra with R14 cavity insulation, that's code compliance all the way up to climate zone 7. To meet climate zone 8, I believe it's about 2.5. One thing I should point out though is these R values are the requirements if you have no HRV or heat recovery system in your home. If you do have one, then you can reduce Interra to about 1.5 inches and still be compliant to up to climate zone 7. So it's pretty straightforward in that regard. One thing to mention though is that on the Canadian side, it requires you to have a vapor barrier on the warm side of your wall assembly. So if we look at our basement wall assembly on the left image, the only source of insulation is Interra, which is up against the foundation wall. So the warm side of the assembly is the inside face of Interra, which is already a vapor barrier. So this is code compliant. But once you start putting cavity insulation in front of Interra, like the image on the right side, then technically the warm side of this assembly is now on the inside face of the stud. And that's okay if it's an above grade wall. But for foundation walls, we don't really recommend an additional vapor barrier in this wall assembly. This isn't a problem in the US though, because the codes, as far as I know, don't require an additional vapor retarder for basement walls. But in Canada, because of the way the code's written, it does. You could run into issues if you use a vapor barrier. So what we recommend, typically, if as long as the Interra insulation is thick enough, you shouldn't require a vapor barrier. But if you end up having or wanting to use a vapor barrier, we recommend using a variable permeance vapor barrier or smart barrier. That will allow any moisture in the wall assembly to dry to the inside. And, oops, sorry. And using a smart vapor barrier is also covered in the code, so it is code compliant. So just keep that in mind when you're insulating Interra and using the Canadian code. All right, so in terms of installation, first thing you want to do is you prep your foundation wall, so make sure the wall is dry, clean, and free of debris. Remove any protrusions that could damage the laminate or prevent Interra from being flush against the foundation wall. You can start placing Interra at the corners, starting from the corner from the top of slab to the underside of the ceiling joist. Interra can be easily secured to the foundation wall using construction adhesive and easily cut to size using just a utility knife. So for ceiling joints, to maintain the continuity of the thermal, air, and vapor barrier, ensure the edges are tight, spray foam and tape seal all joints and penetrations. You can use red tuck tape, but blue tuck tape is recommended if you don't have blue tuck tape in your area. As long as it's a low permeable sheathing tape, it should be just fine. Okay, and then you can build a frame wall if that's what you need to do. So this provides space for electrical and plumbing. The reflected laminate can reflect heat back into the basement space, reducing heat loss. Reflective benefits requires an airspace between the drywall and Interra surface, so no cavity insulation or provide an air gap. So those are the installation practices. It's really straightforward. It's no different than how you would really install any type of rigid insulation product. So there's no special training involved when you're installing Interra. In terms of environmental impact, I'm just going to point out a couple things here. I mentioned that Neopor is Green Guard certified. It's a very rigorous testing program run by UL or Underwriters Laboratories. And any product that passes this program basically demonstrates that they don't give off any harmful chemicals to occupants or to the environment during its use. So Neopor does have Green Guard certification. And comparing it to XPS, XPS can contain up to 16 times or more global warming potential compared to GPS. I don't have time to get into all the benefits of using GPS in terms of the environmental impacts compared to XPS. But if you want to know more about this, we do have a few blogs on our website that are really good and detailed that looks at the comparisons between XPS and GPS in terms of environmental impacts. So it's worth checking out. In terms of support, we offer a number of technical services. So we're happy to, you can email us or call us, and we're happy to discuss any questions you have. Could be building code related, design, or construction related. We also have CAD details. If we don't have a CAD detail you're looking for, contact us and we'll be happy to help develop a CAD detail that will hopefully work for your project. We do that in-house and there's no charge for that either. We have all the typical testing and evaluations in place. There's technical bulletins. We have the specs and data sheets, an illustrative install guide. All this information can be found in our technical library, including other information that I didn't mention in this webcast. And we do have a tool called the 1-minute R-value calculator. It's a pretty handy tool. So what it'll do, it's an online app basically, and it will calculate your total or your effective R-value for your wall assembly. But it will also allow you to enter your climate zone for your project. So it'll tell you what target R value you have to hit to be code compliant. And you can tweak your wall assembly in this program to make sure you hit whatever target R value you're looking for. It also prints out a report for you as well. So it's a really nifty tool. It's worth checking out and playing with. We had CCMC and QAI listings. We've been tested in Canada to S701 and C578 in the States. Neopor is also UL and QAI listed as well. We do have local dealers, and if you're interested in seeing samples, contact us and we'll arrange for samples for you. We also have on-site support available if you haven't used Interra before. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Hopefully that gave you a better idea of what Halo Interra is and its features and benefits and how it compares to XPS. So what we'll do now is we'll run the Q&A. We did get some questions ahead of time, so I'm going to go through those first, and then we'll open up the floor to any further comments or questions. Okay, so one of the questions that came in was use under roof rafters. What about radiant barriers? I'm assuming radiant barriers, you're wondering if it needs to be used along with Interra under roof rafters. So basically, Interra can be used under roof rafters and cathedral ceilings. I would refer you to our installation guide because it does talk about that more. But with radiant barriers, you would still need an air gap to get that reflective benefit. So using Interra with an air gap would serve that purpose. So you wouldn't need an additional radiant barrier if you're using Interra. How to apply both Xterra and Interra to a 2x6 inch wall system filled with rock wool insulation. So that's not typically done. The nice thing about Interra is if you're doing a renovation on the interior and you don't have exterior insulation, that's a good opportunity to put continuous insulation from the interior side. It's preferable if you can put all your insulation on exterior, but if you're going to put it on both sides, you'd have to look at that more closely. There's a number of issues that you have to keep in mind. You know, they're your climate zones. You wouldn't want to do this in the warm side. But if you could keep your insulation either on the interior or the exterior, more preferably, that's the way to go. It makes sense to put Interra in there though if you're doing renovations. Hopefully that answered your question, but you can bring it up at the end of this session if you want more clarification. Oops. Okay, I think that's all the questions we've got that came in. If I missed your question, I apologize, but now's an opportunity to bring up any further questions or comments that anyone might have. So I'm going to hand it off to Andy to open up the floor. But before I do, I just want to thank you all again for taking the time to be with us for this webcast. We really appreciate it. So over to you, Andy.
Well, thanks, Francis. Well, listen, there's been a few questions I've replied to everybody privately, but I've got a couple that I can pose. Austin would like to know, Francis, do we have Revit wall assemblies? I guess that involve Halo products.
We don't have Revit wall assemblies for the Halo products. We could put Revit wall assemblies together. We have the capability to do that in-house. I mean, there's so many different combinations that's you know, potential. But if there's specific combinations you're looking for, you know, feel free to email me or contact us, and we'd be happy to put it together for you, for sure.
Okay. Peter would like to know, so we're off topic here a
Sure.
little bit, but we're still on Halo. Peter, I think Peter's referring to Xterra, I think. And Peter would like to know if you would recommend or we would recommend using Xterra on the exterior of roofing.
Exterior on the exterior of roofing. You can do that. It's been used in the past. We might even have details on it as well. So The short answer to that is yes. But what's important is how you detail that roof assembly.
Okay, very good. Well, listen, Francis, that's all the questions we've got. So everybody, we're right on time. And oh, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. Thank you very much. We have a question that just came in. Nick would like to know, is in okay, so for crawl spaces, and so Nick is, I guess, trying to get a distinction between Xterra and Interra FR. So,
Okay.
um, so Nick is looking for crawl spaces. What products do we recommend? Halo products do we recommend for crawl spaces? Bottom line.
Bottom line for crawl spaces from the interior, yeah, use Interra. If you don't want to cover it, use Interra FR. If you're in the States, in Canada, you probably have to cover it anyway. If you're gonna insulate from the exterior, Subterra is the way to go with that as well.
Okay. All right. So listen, everybody, thank you very much. You're going to receive, everyone's going to receive a follow-up email, and it'll have a link to this, a recording of this presentation. And if you have any further questions at all, feel free to respond to us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So I'm just going to leave the last word to you, Francis.
Okay, thanks again, everyone, and enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.